Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. My name is Mickey Feldman-Simon, and I am the founder of I'm Back at Work. I'm also a career and executive coach. I have over 25 years of corporate experience in a variety of roles, from head of human resources and recruiting to head of marketing, head of operations. And I use all my experience to coach people and to help them become the best version of themselves personally and professionally. I'm very excited to have you here with us today. We have Dr. Heather Rothbauer-Vanish with us today, who is a resume expert. She has so many tips to share with us today. I just loved seeing her content, and I'm sure you'll gain a lot from our presentation today. And I hope you join us for our other live presentations in the future and watch our past recordings. And now I want to make sure that everybody can navigate the GoToWebinar panel. And your webinar panel may look like the image on the right, where it is closed up, or the image on the left, where it is expanded. And to open and close the webinar panel, you just click on the orange arrow at the top, and that will open or close your panel. You can also drag and move it out of the way, and you do that by clicking anywhere at the top. You just click at the top and then drag it out of the way. So this way, hopefully the webinar panel will not obstruct your view of the presentation. In the last 5 minutes of the webinar, we will have a Q&A session. To ask questions, you click on the gray questions bar, and then you type in your questions in the blue rectangle underneath. And we will address all of your questions at the end of the webinar. Now I am going to turn my video camera off so that you can concentrate on the presentation. I'm going to pass it on to you, Dr. Heather. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'm so excited to be here today and to give you these tips. So I will tell you a little bit about myself, and then we'll start jumping right into the tips. So as Mickey mentioned, my name is Dr. Heather Rothbauer-Vanish, and that's very long, so I just go by Dr. Heather or Heather. But I am a certified professional resume writer. I've actually written thousands of resumes for over 10 years. I'm a member of 2 different professional organizations, one of them being the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches, and the other one being the National Resume Writers Association. And I was super fortunate. I've been able to go and to speak at several of those conferences, including Denver, Charlotte, Florida, and last week I was really fortunate to speak on a cruise ship. It was our first conference at sea. So I'm up to date on what it takes to develop a key resume for today's workplace. And I'm excited to share these top 10 tips. And I have to tell you that there's actually more than 10. So there's some extras thrown in there along the way also. And as Mickey mentioned, I am more than happy to answer your questions at the end of this. I absolutely love writing resumes, and I would love to help you figure things out with yours or answer any questions that you might have as you're returning to the workplace. So I'm going to turn my video camera off so we can look at the slides. All right, so my first slide has to do with just some general statistics. And I know a lot of you are just looking to return to the workforce. So these are some statistics that will kind of help you understand where recruiters and where hiring managers are coming from. So on average, a recruiter only spends about 5 to 7 seconds reviewing your resume. Obviously, he or she is not reading your whole document within that time. So you need to make sure that you catch the eye of the recruiter or manager immediately. The first resume is typically received less than 200 seconds after a job is posted. And depending on the job, about 250 resumes might be received for each job position. So one grammar or one spelling mistake can really result in your document being thrown out or going to the no pile. And we'll talk about some ways to get around that as we go along. So your goal of your resume is actually to get an interview. It's your piece of paper or your file to get your foot into the door. And it allows you to stand out from the crowd and to grab the attention of the employer. Again, your resume is your chance to stand out, and you need to be remembered, and you need to make that great first impression. The other thing that it allows you to do is to demonstrate and illustrate to the company that you understand their needs and that you have researched them and you understand what they need from the person that lands this particular job. So tip number one is to get organized. And this actually is twofold. So it's organized from the perspective of making sure all of your information is in one place. So many times people haven't searched for a job in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, maybe even 15 or 20 years. And now it's time to make a resume and you aren't organized. Your performance reviews are in your email. You have a hard copy of your old resume. You're not quite sure where your transcripts are. So keeping all of that information in one spot is extremely important. What I do, and for myself even personally, is I do keep a copy of my resume in my email. I have it saved online, and I also have a hard copy just in case something happens. The other thing I do is just keep everything together. And one of the things that people typically don't do, and it's because you're thinking about yourself, and most of us don't like to do that so much, but keep a list of your skills, your abilities, your qualifications, your expertise, because when it comes to your resume, you're going to be asked for some of that information. You're going to need to put that on a job application, and I guarantee you they will ask you that in an interview. So you need to get organized ahead of time. The other way you can make sure that you're organized is once you start doing your job search. So sometimes people start sending out lots of resumes to different places. You need to track that. So what I recommend to my clients is maybe start an Excel spreadsheet. Keep an electronic copy of the date that you applied, the name of the position, who you sent it to, and if and when you followed up, how you have done so. Because that will allow you to organize your job search, and it will be less time consuming for you, and it will be less confusing. And it gives you a great opportunity to follow up with those organizations in a timely manner. So I have 2 slides here for tip number 2. And I will tell you from personal experience and from talking to recruiters and hiring managers, when you're looking at a resume format, there are 2 main ones to consider, but this one, the chronological format, is by far the more preferred format. So when we're talking about format, we're talking about how you're listing your employment. And chronological or reverse chronological means that you list your most recent position first. So you start with your most current position or whatever job that you did last, and you move backward from that point. Now, one question I get a lot is, how far back do I go? My last, maybe your last job was 5 years ago. Well, then that's the one that's on the top of your resume. And typically, we only go back about 10 to 15 years in job history. Now, some of that does depend on when your job breaks were, how many jobs you've had within that time frame, and if you've changed positions within the same organization. But the nice thing about this format is it's easy to understand, it goes through online systems extremely well, and it's very good, especially if you haven't changed jobs a lot. One disadvantage is it can emphasize age too much, which is why we only go back about 10 to 15 years. And sometimes it does reflect those gaps in your work history. However, there are ways to kind of get around those gaps, and we can talk about those in a little bit as well. So this is the other type of resume format that you will hear about, and this is called a functional format. Again, I would stay away from this one as much as possible, because what happens when you group things by functions is that it minimizes the time that you worked at different locations. So for example, if somebody has an accounting background and they've done some marketing work, they might have 2 different functional areas. One's called accounting and finance, Maybe the other one's called sales and marketing. So what you do is you list your skills and achievements within each of those areas. It's nice from the perspective that it can show diverse skill sets and you can really highlight some of your different abilities. The problem is it doesn't really describe each one of your job positions. And what happens when you go through these online systems is all of this information just kind of gets bundled together. And when you just have a simple line describing where you worked, when it goes through online systems, it doesn't look like you did anything there, which we all know is not true. So my opinion, and from what I have talked, or from who I've talked to as far as hiring professionals, I would most definitely use the reverse chronological format and stay away from this one. And I point this out because I know a lot of times people use Microsoft Word templates and different versions they see online. Make sure that you pick a format that is in reverse chronological order and isn't a functional type of format. So my next tip is to remember the ATS. And if you've never heard of this and you only take one thing away from this webinar today, I highly recommend this one. So an ATS is an applicant tracking system or applicant tracking software. So most people are applying online through company websites, through a LinkedIn advertisement, Indeed, whatever the case may be. When you hit submit with your resume document, there is not someone on the other end looking at your resume, reading it word for word and putting you in the yes pile. There is software on those systems that is designed to weed people out. They are trying to make the resume pile smaller, not bigger. So you have to keep that in mind when you're applying to these positions through online sites. So what happens is, software is scanning your document to see how many words in your document match their job posting. If you don't have a certain percentage of keywords that match, you're out. You are out before a human being even looks at your resume. And I don't tell people that to scare them, but I tell people that so they're aware of it. Because time and time again, people will say, I was the perfect person for this job. I don't understand why I didn't get a call. You might have been the perfect person for the job, but if you don't have the right words in your resume, you won't even get an interview. So you have to use keywords. And the question becomes, well, how do I know what the keywords are? So one way to know what the keywords are is thinking about what they're asking for in their qualification section or in their knowledge or skills required. Typically, it's a bulleted list. That list contains your keywords. So if they're asking for somebody that has attention to detail, those 3 words, attention to detail, and you currently have listed that you're detail oriented, you should change your document to say attention to detail. The closer that you can match that, the better off you are. Tip number 4 is to lose the objective. Now, years ago, and it depends on your age, and when I was in high school, we put an objective on our resumes. We always listed that at the top, but honestly, your objective, if you're sending a resume, is to get a new job. So the objective is somewhat self-explanatory. And honestly, in the past, an objective didn't tell us much anyway. It basically said something to the effect of, to utilize my education and skills in a role where I can grow. Well, honestly, again, that doesn't tell us anything. So instead of an objective, and especially because that's at the top of your document, you need to put a career summary on top. And if you haven't worked in a while, which I know is the case, then maybe we put more of a career kind of personal summary. So there's an example on this slide of a career summary, and I know on a PowerPoint slide it looks extremely long, but honestly, when it's in a Microsoft Word document, it's about 3 or 4 lines in total. The idea of the summary at the top is twofold. Number 1, it's to make sure that as soon as somebody looks at this, I read this, I know that this person is in finance. This person is investment oriented. This person manages projects. This person is not an elementary education teacher. He or she is not a salesperson. Finance. This is what this resume is designed for. The other part of putting a career summary or a personal summary at the top is to make sure you're starting to highlight some of those keywords. So this particular one, I can tell you the keywords that were in the job posting, and this was a gentleman that was applying, were investment analysis, market research, project management, strategic planning. So we are able to already talk about those keywords at the top of the document, which is very, very important as we're doing that. So sometimes people are wondering, well, what do I do as far as skills? Because I don't know what to put there. So here are a couple of examples for you. You want to use as many skills as you can, but you don't want it to take up half of your document. So here are two different ways that you can show your skills. And on these two, I actually called them core competencies. It doesn't matter what you call this section. It can be called skills, it can be called abilities, areas of expertise, knowledge areas. It doesn't matter what you call it. The point is that this is the area where you can match a lot of those keywords. And actually the example I gave previously about being detail oriented versus strong attention to detail, you can see that in the bottom skills section here. We actually changed it to say strong attention to detail because that is what the job posting mentioned. So one other thing I would caution you on, and I say this jokingly, but kind of not, is I don't know if you know, but people sometimes lie on their resumes. So we need to make sure anything that you're putting on here, you can back that up during an interview. So if you put problem resolution as one of your skills, and during an interview they say, oh, we see you have problem resolution as one of your skills. Give us an example of when you were able to utilize that skill. You need to have that example at the ready during a job interview because that's very, very important. There's a huge difference between saying that you're highly organized or giving an example of when you're highly organized. So we need to make sure we're doing that. Tip number 6 is to list varying experiences, especially when you've taken time off from the workplace and now you're going back. Chances are maybe you haven't been paid for a lot of the work you've been doing over the past few years. We can still list that. There's no written rule that says our professional history, our work experience has to be paid work experience. So a couple of examples of that are, let's say you went back to school and you didn't work for a while, but you did have an internship, or you had 2 internships. You don't need to necessarily list that as an internship experience. It can still be labeled as professional history or professional experience. And the other thing that I would tell you is you don't have to list all of the job experiences that you've ever had. Especially if you're over a certain age, there's no reason to go back that far because they're just not relevant. So one of the examples I give is I graduated high school almost 25 years ago. During high school, I was a bank teller. I also cleaned hotel rooms on the weekends. I don't put either of those on my resume anymore because neither of them really pertain to what it is that I want to do in the future. I would tell you, however, if I was applying to work at a bank now, I would put my bank teller experience on there just to show that I have worked in that environment. So one of the tricks and ideas for kind of getting around having to list everything is, instead of calling it work history or professional history, call it selected work history or call it relevant professional experience. By adding either the word relevant or selected, you are automatically saying, this isn't everything I've ever done, but here are the things that are relevant to you. Here are the things that I know are important to your company. So that's a couple of ways to kind of get around that. And we'll talk about, what happens if you've taken time off for personal reasons too, when we get to the dates. So tip number 7 is to discuss achievements. not responsibilities. So all of us have some sort of job description, some longer than others. But here's the thing, a lot of job descriptions sound exactly the same. And I'm not saying the job is exactly the same, but the job description is. So what happens when you put your job duties and responsibilities on your resume is it starts to sound like everyone else. And I'm not saying that you can't put some of those responsibilities on there, but the point is you really need to focus on, here's my responsibility, but look what I achieved. Look at my accomplishment. So what I tell people is if there's any sort of number that you can pull, a percentage, a dollar amount, number of employees, did you get new customers? Did you increase sales by 15% in 3 months? Whatever it is, if you can pull a number out of that, that weighs much more than just responsibilities. Our eyes are automatically drawn to numbers, so we want to make sure that we use them whenever we can. So think about it this way. There's a huge difference between saying, I increased sales or I built the client list. Okay, what if you could say, expanded the client list from 35 accounts to 100 accounts within the first 90 days of employment? There's a huge difference between those two statements on a resume. So quantifying information is really important. And again, some jobs are much easier than others to pull numbers from. If you're in sales or marketing or things like that, it is a lot easier. But if you were a member of a team of 15 individuals that created a new process for your organization, put that on there. If you oversaw a $10,000 office supply budget, put that on there. If you volunteered with your kids' school for an organization and you led the fundraiser, put that on there. But don't just say you led the fundraiser, mention how much money you raised within X amount of days or a 6-week time frame, or you oversaw your flag football budget of $5,000 for 2 seasons. Whatever the case is, adding a number adds punch to your resume. So kind of start thinking, what are some different ways that you can include numbers that really highlight those achievements? Community engagement, also known as volunteerism. So oftentimes when women are returning to work after having kids or caring for parents or maybe changing careers, there's a lot of volunteerism in between. And frankly, there's probably a lot of volunteerism just in general. So if you volunteered within the community, if you've been on a board of directors, think about how that involvement really could enhance your career path and how it would look to the company. Because most companies want employees who are involved and who can be professional representatives of their organization. So a couple of ways to do that. If you've been on a board of directors, tell us about that a little bit more. Did you attend monthly meetings? Did you lead the meetings? Were you the person charged with, again, the fundraising or the marketing of the organization? Sometimes people just list the name of the organization, but if what you did there pertains to your career, then talk about it, because that can also be professional engagement as well as volunteerism. So especially if you're in a very well-known sort of community-oriented organization, there is validity to naming that organization as well. So if it's something like Kiwanis, Junior Achievement, United Way, something like that that's easily recognizable, I would most definitely put that on there. And sometimes if what you have is volunteerism for the last 10 years, then that's what you have. So you can absolutely go into detail about that and talk about how this makes you a potential better employee. This is kind of a funny one, and sometimes people are like, I hadn't thought about that. I wouldn't add a second page to your resume for this, but sometimes you will have space at the bottom of your resume. You'll have white space and you're kind of thinking, well, what could I put there? what adds something to this resume. You don't want to add things just for the sake of making it longer. But if you have testimonials on LinkedIn, if you have written recommendation letters, if you have a customer email where they really give you a glowing review or a performance review, you might want to consider adding some of that to your resume. So sometimes they'll add a tiny section at the bottom that says endorsements or testimonials. And I just include maybe 1 or 2 lines, maybe a sentence to highlight your strengths. There is a difference between laying out on paper your strengths, what you've achieved, your responsibilities, why you're the right person for the job. All of that's great. But when you can start to say, yes, here's everything I've done, but look what Bob Smith said about me. Bob also thinks I'm amazing. And you can include a written recommendation from him that adds that third-party validation to your information and to your resume. So if you have space and if you have a recommendation, just consider that as another way to kind of make your document stand out. And tip number 10 is to think about dates. This is a tricky one, especially if you're returning to work after having kids and took 10 years off, or even if you're changing career paths, it can be important. So age discrimination, as much as all of us want to think, our society values experience, age discrimination is definitely an issue in the workplace. The Age Discrimination and Employment Act actually goes into effect after age 40, but there is really no line in the sand as far as when you could potentially be discriminated against. So one way to reduce the opportunity for that is you don't list every job back to high school. So again, we talked about you don't have to list every single job you've ever had. Sometimes people have done some job hopping. If you're someone that has had a lot of jobs in a short amount of time, and again, a lot of that is no fault of your own. Maybe you got laid off, maybe you moved, maybe the company closed, who knows? But what you can do as an option is list years only. Otherwise, the month and the year is pretty typical. You definitely don't need to list the exact start date and the exact end date. The other thing that I see a lot of people do is they always keep the date on there with their education. So let's say they graduated from college in 1985. At some point, people start to do the math in their heads and they think, this person's a little bit older. She's probably going to want more money, or she might be out of touch a little bit. I don't think we're going to call her. And you'll never know that. So education never needs a date unless you graduated from college last Saturday and you don't have any professional experience at all. Other than that, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that you have the education. So one of the things that comes into play a lot is if you have taken some of that time off of work for family reasons, and a lot of people right now, caring for ailing parents or caring for an ailing child. If you've taken anything over, I would say 3 to 6 months off of work, I do include a line in there. I don't go into a lot of detail about why, I had to care for an ailing family member, but I just did this with a client last week, and we did put something in there that said, took 2017 through early 2019, took time away from the workforce due to family circumstances. I think that most employers understand that people have lives outside of work. And so I do like to address that gap, because if you don't put anything there, people tend to wonder a little bit about what you were doing. So again, not a lot of detail, but you can say family circumstances, caring for an ailing family member, something like that, being a little bit generic, but letting them know this is what I was doing for the last year or 2 years, or whatever the case might be. Here are some formatting tips for you. So use a very readable and common font. So the one that I typically use is Calibri. That just happens to be the default font in Microsoft Word. It's easy to read, and you don't have to worry about any strange formatting issues. Now, I will tell you, most people do create their resumes in Word. However, when you're uploading them to some of those job sites and you have a choice between a Word document and a PDF, choose the PDF, because a PDF is something that can be opened by anyone. You will not lose formatting, and people aren't able to change a PDF. If you send a Word document, it's usually editable, so things could change, and once in a while, depending upon the version of Word that they're using, the formatting can get a little bit skewed. Another tip is to use bulleted phrases instead of paragraphs. You don't need to use complete sentences. And for me, that goes against the grain of just how I'm wired, but it's true. You don't need to use complete sentences. It's more of a bulleted phrase type of thing. We don't want to use large paragraphs simply because they become very blocky. And the other issue with that is that people don't want to read huge blobs of text. They just don't. So phrases, short, sweet, much better. Keep the tone of voice the same throughout. When you're talking about a past position, obviously it's in past tense. I just bring that up because a lot of times when you're writing things, your brain doesn't work that way. So just make sure it's very consistent. Also be sure to use spell check and grammar check, but also be aware they don't catch everything. So if you have the opportunity to do so, I would highly recommend printing your resume out on a piece of paper and also having somebody else look at it. So often our mind and our brain and our eyes fix our own mistakes that we don't see them. And this is my technical word of don't get cutesy with clip art, color, fancy graphics, and things like that. The reason is a lot of that won't go through those online tracking systems. And I heard something extremely relevant last week at the resume writing conference that I was at. Someone that spoke said, get through first, stand out later. And that's exactly how you have to think of these online application systems. You need to get through the system first, and you can stand out afterwards. But you will never have the opportunity to stand out if you can't even get through the system to get an interview. So think of it that way. And if you decide to use color, I strongly recommend sticking with something like green or blue, something very easy to read, something that will print out decent if they print it out, and not yellow, pink, red, anything like that. So I told you I had more than 10 tips. So here's some more formatting tips. Avoid using the word I and focus on the employer. So your resume should be written in third person. So I wouldn't say, I worked at XYZ company. I would say, while working at XYZ company, secured 52 new accounts within the first 24 hours. Obviously, that didn't happen, but that's just an example. You wouldn't use I, me, we, or us. Don't use abbreviations for resumes unless the job posting uses the abbreviation. Otherwise, again, you're kind of downplaying your keyword matching. And this is my personal, I don't want to call it a pet peeve, but my personal vision thing that I have. I like to keep the resume even on the page. So I like to have the same amount of white space at the top and the bottom. That's why for me, if I have a big gap at the bottom, I like to put in a testimonial or some additional information just to make sure it's visually appealing to the human eye once it gets to that point. So just some final tips to remember and think about. Resumes really are your chance to be you, and don't be afraid of telling others of your successes and accomplishments, and especially for women returning to work. One of the things that I hear all of the time, and I heard 2 people say it yesterday, was, well, I just stayed home and raised my kids, or I've just done some volunteer work with these 2 organizations, or I've just been taking care of my mom because she's ill. First of all, eliminate the word just, because only you are thinking that, I can promise you. And the thing is if you don't tell people of your accomplishments, I guarantee you that somebody else is telling that company about their accomplishments. So you need to get through the system. You need to make sure that you stand out and you are not bragging. If the things that you are talking about and putting on your resume are true, then they're true. They happened. It's not bragging. Follow the directions of the employers. Make sure that you do that. Like I said, if they require a Word document, then that's what you send. If they say a resume and a cover letter, then you need to send a cover letter with your resume. If they ask for a PDF, then that's the type of file you send. Think of the directions and the application process as the first part of the interview, because it really is. And then whenever possible, if you can research the employer and tailor that information, definitely do that. They will notice and you will stand out and you will look prepared. So that contains all of my tips for today about resumes. But like Mickey said at the beginning, I would be happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure she would as well.
Well, thank you, Heather. So much information. So Heather, I turned my video camera back on if you want to turn yours on as well. And I know a couple of people joined a little bit late. I'm not sure if you thought the webinar started a little bit later. You will be able to watch the recording in about an hour. It will be available already so that you can make sure that you did not miss out on anything. While you type in your questions, I want to also invite you to join the I'm Back at Work Facebook group, where we support each other on a more regular basis, and any kind of tips that we can provide, let you know about available jobs, etc. And Heather, that was so much useful information. I hope that you can all take it as a good start to writing your resume. And tell me, Heather, how do you work with your clients?
Sure. So basically what we do is I have them send me whatever they have. So sometimes it's a resume from high school, sometimes it's just some bulleted notes. Whatever they have is fine. So how I work with them is I have them send me that. I take a little bit of time to look at the information, develop some questions, and then what we do is we have about a 30-minute consultation so that I can ask them more questions, because what I have found throughout the years is people sell themselves short, and especially women sell themselves short. And so I've kind of developed some questions and some different ways to ask things to draw out more information. So we do that, and then after our conversation, typically within about 5 business days, I turn around a draft. They can look at it and say this looks good, or we need to make some changes. We work together through any changes, and once they're happy with everything, I send them the final file and they have that for their future use.
Sounds very very efficient and very useful. And Rose is asking, do you also review people's resumes just to give them comments, etc.?
Yep, I offer free resume reviews. So what I do is, my email address is on the screen if anybody wants to take advantage of that. But I do offer free resume reviews, because if you haven't done a resume for quite a while, you don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of things that have changed. So I give free resume reviews, say, here's what I would do, here are some things I would change, and then if they decide they want to make the changes on their own, they're more than free to do that. And if they want to chat with me further, we can do that also.
So I have to say that putting the time and effort in writing a good resume, apart from getting that interview and getting through the door, is a great exercise of practicing for your interview, because every little thing that you're putting on your resume will be something that you will want to talk about in the interview further down the line. And I think, as you said, Heather, as well, that it's so important to be accurate and not write things that you have not done. Exactly. And that's a good place to also sort of think about where do we stretch the truth a little bit, or where, you know, what is it that makes sense? Now, Deborah is asking, what are your typical costs? Are you comfortable sharing that with us today too?
Yes. So, so I preface this by saying, if you go online and type in like, I need to hire a resume writer, you are going to see everything from someone that charges $20 to somebody that charges $3,000 and everything in between. So I typically charge somewhere between $300 and $600, just depending on what we're starting with. Some people have a little bit more to start with. Some people are starting from scratch, but that's pretty typical, somewhere between 3 and 5. I really only have about 3 different packages, and people tend to gravitate towards the middle. Most people get a resume and cover letter. You might not need the cover letter, but in my opinion, it's better to have it and not need it than be in the other situation. So that's typically 300 to 600, somewhere in there.
And I can say from my experience, that is very reasonable. And I think that we've all seen that Dr. Heather really knows what she's talking about. So we are going to wait to see if there's any other questions. And Deborah is asking, I have 3 different types of resumes. I have 3 different resumes, but afraid to combine them because one is an entirely different industry, 2 are the same. So what do you do when you have people with different kinds of resumes and thinking of different industries?
Well, and that's actually pretty common. I'm working with somebody right now that sent me 3 versions of her resume. So what I tell people is that it's okay to have like maybe 2 versions. What I typically do if somebody is looking at maybe this industry and that industry is maybe we change up the skills section in the career summary. But to a certain extent, like what you did at work is what you did. There's only so many different ways to say that. So that's what I recommend, is changing the slant of the career summary at the top and that skills section, and then keeping the professional section the same. Another option though, I will tell you, and I've done this as well, so it does depend a little bit on what the individual is doing, is I had somebody that had done education, had been a teacher for quite a while, and she wasn't quite sure if she was going to do that, so she had some experience in another industry. So we actually sectioned off her work history into 2 pieces. So I think it was like accounting or something. So we had like accounting experience, teaching experience. And depending upon what she was applying to, she flipped them or flopped them. Because that way we can show diversity. Like, I can do 2 different things, no problem. I'm able to fit into organizations. But if she was applying to an accounting job, that's more important. And if she was applying to a teaching job, that was more important. So there's a couple different ways to handle that, but I don't want people to have to reinvent the wheel every single time that they're sending this thing out. So I try to design them in such a way that they're flexible. Yes, maybe you have 2 versions, but honestly, you shouldn't need a lot more than that.
Thank you, Dr. Heather. So we have a few more comments. Melanie saying, I've been out of the workforce first of all, thank you so much for providing this opportunity to us. I've been out of the workforce raising my child for 6 years this month, but doing a lot of volunteer work, so this is very helpful. I'm worried about the career gap issue, and what you've mentioned was helpful and gives me a lot to think about. So Melanie, I really wanted to say that what Heather said in I call it addressing the elephant in the room or the red flag, just saying what it is instead of having the recruiters, whoever's going through your resume, thinking, who knows what she did during that time. Let them know what you did and address it and be basically proactive about it.
Right. Yeah, they'll note, I mean, they're going to notice if you haven't worked for 6 years, of course. So, and like I said, I don't think there's any validity in hiding it. I mean, there's nothing to hide, so you stayed home. That's your prerogative. So I think there is validity to saying, raise children or whatever the case is, but address it. But don't go into tons of detail. And then after that, start talking about some of that volunteerism that you've done. And I've worked with women that have taken 15 years off to raise kids or whatever the case might be. And they honestly, what I said is true. They'll say, well, I just stayed home and raised my kids. Oh my goodness, like you have been organizing schedules, you've been volunteering, you've been doing a lot of things. So use some of those skills in your skills section too, or in your summary at the top. There's no, I mean, like Mickey said, be proactive about it and use what you've done to your advantage, because there's definitely skills that you've honed during the last 6 years that, you know, don't have anything to do with quote work, but we all know it's a lot of work. So
and I also say own it. If you come in and when you're in an interview afterwards and you talk about the fact, proudly saying that you've taken time off to raise your kids, it's definitely sounds way better. Well, I took time off and you made a decision. So you can't put no. And we have Liz asking, when is it appropriate to have 2 pages on your resume? So I will address first and then Dr. Heather can say some more. My attitude is I see a resume as very expensive real estate, and I would ask you that anything that you put on there, is it adding value to who you are, and is it helping you get that interview and get that job? So 2 pages of a resume I think is reasonable, okay? Unless you just got out of college and have no work experience, then what you're telling me there is obviously too much, okay? I think that Heather and I were discussing it, that we don't like to see a lot of empty space. Don't make it 1.5 pages or something like that. But I think that 2 pages is a nice amount for the recruiter to just skim through. Usually, sometimes 1 page, if you have a lot of experience, you might need to use small font and it won't be easy on the eye. So I think 2 pages is something that makes sense. Anything after that, I would say, why? Right. Dr. Heather, anything else you would add?
In my opinion, 2 pages max. You know, sometimes people will send me a 7-page document. It's like nobody's reading it. Nobody's reading anything beyond that, I guarantee you. So think strategically. And also remember, you know, you need to have things that you can bring to the table during the interview also. So if you're like, oh, but I want to add this and that, keep those things in your back pocket for the interview so you have additional things to talk about. But 2 pages at the most and never 1.5 pages. That's a no-no. You need to either figure out formatting or eliminate some information that's just not quite as relevant or important to that job.
Well, I think we have a lot of thank yous, and we thank you for joining us as well. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Heather.
You're welcome.
And I hope to see you all again soon in our other webinars.
Thanks, everyone.